If you've been told that eating on a tight budget in our current economy means you have to eat bland, tasteless, colorless food, then here are 4 meals to prove that theory wrong. I recently read that fresh fruits and vegetables are the one thing that has not gone up as much in price. I'm grabbing everything from my local Walmart. I have my grocery list on screen as well as in the description box if you are wanting to make these meals this week. Each of these meals should feed 2 people, but I found that I also had a 3rd portion left over that I took to work the next day. It wasn't quite enough for a full person, but for a kid, it would probably be sufficient. For this challenge, I'm adding in as many fresh veggies as possible. I will also be using salt, pepper, and basic seasonings as well as oil as freebies. I wanted to add that in just in case you're running a little low on any of those ingredients or maybe don't have them on hand. I did see that Walmart carries seasonings for less than $1. First, we're making this chorizo pizza. To make this pizza, you're gonna need cilantro, an onion, half a package of your chorizo. If you don't like corn on your pizza, you could leave that off and do the whole package of chorizo instead. You're gonna need all-purpose flour, fast rise, yeast, mozzarella, and corn. I'm using this bread maker that I have on hand just to help me with the mixing, but you could definitely do this all in a bowl. I'm starting off with a half a cup of warm water, a tablespoon of sugar. This is optional, you can use a tablespoon of flour to feed your yeast instead, and 1 1/4 teaspoons of your yeast. You're going to stir this all together and let it sit and grow. After about 10 minutes, if you don't see any foam on top, then the yeast might not have grown and you're going to want to scrap that and restart it. You should have enough yeast to do this at least 1 time. You're going to preset your oven to 400 degrees. Now you can see the yeast has really grown, so we're going to start adding in our other ingredients. We're adding 1.5 cups of flour. I was shocked the small bag we got had over 7 cups of flour in it. We're adding in 2 tablespoons of oil. Next, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and we're going to turn the machine on to the dough setting and let it whir away and knead our bread for us. This machine, like I said, is not necessary, but it sure makes whipping up bread a lot easier and a lot less labor intensive. Now to start on our toppings. Place half of your pork chorizo packet into a pan and struggle as you try to put it in one-handedly while juggling a camera with the other. Or maybe don't do that part. Heat it thoroughly and the dough for your crust should be just about done. Add in 1/2 cup of your chopped up onions and 1/2 cup of your corn. Mix and heat thoroughly. Now we're going to start on our crust so it has a chance to rise. Plop out your dough onto a baking sheet, stretch it out to your desired thickness, and let it sit on your stove to rise. If you sit it on your stove, the heat from the oven will help it to rise faster. I let it rise for about 15 minutes. But 30 would have potentially been better. But we were really hungry that night and wanted to eat sooner rather than later. Pop the crust into your preheated oven to park bake for about 10 minutes or until it springs back when you touch it. Like this. No, seriously, like this. Now it's time to add the toppings and the cheese. We're gonna spread our chorizo filling on top thinly. Remember, you don't have a sauce on this pizza, but the chorizo is really flavorful, so you technically don't need one. This pizza was definitely not lacking in any flavor when we finished. After spreading out your filling, you're gonna top it with your entire package of cheese. If you wanted to reserve some for a later recipe, we are doing some tacos, but this actually did really well having this much cheese on it. I'm a fan of cheese, and that's one thing I try not to skimp on if I am doing a recipe involving it. Once you've got all that cheese spread out on there and your pizza's looking so pretty, you're gonna switch your oven over to broil. I put it on high for about 2 minutes. You're gonna pop this pizza in the oven and watch it like a hawk. Just try to make sure that it doesn't burn, just brown slightly. When it's gotten this nice golden brown and all of that cheese is bubbling and you can barely wait to eat it, take it out. Man, this looks so good. We're gonna top it with some chopped up cilantro. If you're one of those people that it tastes like soap, don't add the cilantro. You could even add a little basil if you wanted to, just for that pop of color, but I added the cilantro. This fed my husband and I. It could feed a really, really hungry man. So it's not a huge pizza, but it was sufficient. Look at that cheese pull. Okay, that's enough pulling. Leave some cheese for the other slices. I did want to show the crust from the side so you can see the little air pockets in the crust. This wasn't a hugely fluffy crust, but it was really tasty, had a nice crisp edge, and the dough was just the right balance between the toppings, the fillings, the cheese. My husband did comment that this was better than most of the places that we would go to actually eat pizza in a restaurant. So I was pretty happy about that comment. Next up, we're going to be making the sausage meatball stew. This meal is chock full of veggies and delicious flavor. To make this meal, you're going to need 1 potato, a half a pound of mild sausage. I used a little bit of butter, but that's optional. You're going to want frozen corn or canned corn, 3 medium carrots, and a package of brown gravy. You could use the Great Value brand, which is what I would have used, but since I had that on hand, went ahead and just used what I had. You're gonna first roll out your meatballs just with the sausage. Turn your stove to medium heat and heat up your pot. You're gonna wash your baked potato and stab it with a fork. Then microwave it on the baked potato setting in your microwave. You could bake it in your oven, but I wanted to conserve some energy, so I just went for the microwave. Put your meatballs in your pan and let them start sauteing while you peel your carrots. Carrots are peeled, your meatballs are sauteing, and you're going to flip them over. They should be a nice brown color on one side. While the meatballs finish cooking on the other side, we're going to chop up our carrots into large chunks. The meatballs are now done, and we're going to add in our carrots. Now the carrots are going to soak up some of that grease that's in the bottom that's flavored, and it's going to make the carrots taste so good. Give it a little stir so that everything gets well coated, and let it sit and cook. Once the carrots are pretty tender, you're going to add in your brown gravy. First, you're going to add in your cup of cold water. This will cook for about 3 or 4 minutes or until those carrots start getting tender. Now, like I said, you could use the Great Value brand of gravy mix. I had this one on hand, and that's why I used this one. I would have gone and bought the other one, but I wanted to leave it on the shelf for anybody who might be needing that cheaper packet right now. Now, I did want to add that you could use whatever gravy you have on hand. If you have chicken gravy, that's great. Turkey gravy, awesome. Even a sausage gravy packet like this Pioneer Country sausage mix would probably taste delicious on this. You're going to add in a cup of corn, and you're going to stir this and let it heat through. And while this heats through, we're going to start focusing on our baked potato. For our baked potato, we're going to slice it in half, smush it down, add a little bit of butter and salt and pepper to taste. If you were wanting to do a whole baked potato for each person, you could, but I felt like half a baked potato was actually plenty considering how much meat and veggies we were going to put on top of it. Now you're going to pour a generous serving of your stew over top of your potato. And I forgot to say, we're going to add some sliced up green onions. This I factored into the price, but I, for some reason, didn't put it in when I was filming. And we're going to sprinkle those on top. This just adds that great pop of color, really makes it taste vibrant and look vibrant. And this meal was so delicious. I actually think this might have been my favorite of the meals I'm making in this video, but it's hard to say. They were all really good. Our next meal is going to be chorizo tacos with tortilla shells we made ourselves. First, you're going to need cilantro, onions, corn, the other half of that pork chorizo. You're going to need a diced tomato. I'm shaving the cabbage really thin, and you're going to need all-purpose flour. I'm also using a little bit of salt and oil. First, plop your chorizo, one-handed again, into the pan and try to stick your onions and corn into the pot instead of having them flop all over outside of it like I did. Then you're going to add in a 1.5 cups of flour 2 tablespoons of oil, add a pinch of salt, and a half a cup of warm water. You're going to want the water to be warm because you want the dough to have the gluten activated in it so that the tortillas are soft and flexible. You're going to take a small ball about 1 inch across and roll it out until you have something like this. I just pressed it with my hand, but you could use a roller. Now you're going to stick your tortilla into your previously heated pan. Mine's a non-stick pan, but you don't really need any oil. It will cook, and you're gonna know when to flip when you start seeing some bubbles and some dry spots. When you flip, it should have a little bit of color on the other side. The trick with tortillas is to stick them one on top of each other and place a tea towel or a paper towel over top so that they have a chance to steam. Otherwise, they'll be kind of hard and brittle and they won't fold for your tacos very well. Once they've steamed, they'll be pretty soft and you'll be able to roll them up like this. I went ahead and plated. I put the chorizo mix into each of the shells, some of the diced tomatoes, and I put some of my sliced thin cabbage, and I garnished with tomatoes, the sliced cabbage, and a little bit of cilantro. These tacos were delicious and they actually reheated really well. I was surprised, but because it is cabbage and not lettuce on top of them, when you reheat them, even with the cabbage on top, as long as you don't go for too long, it will actually not wilt the cabbage because cabbage takes much longer to cook and wilt than lettuce would. The cabbage also adds such a nice crunch to the dish, and just the pop of color from the tomatoes and the taste from the chorizo is really excellent in this. Now we're making some steamed pot stickers. Now I was really surprised when I looked up the recipe for this to see that the wrappers were very easy to make. First, for this recipe, you're going to need green onions, sliced up cabbage, 2 grated carrots. I'm getting some of these leaves from the cabbage and going to use them to make a low carb version as well. We're going to use our other half of our sausage, all-purpose flour, boiling water to make the wrappers with, soy sauce, and one of my secret things that I like to add to this is sesame seed oil. It's optional, but I feel like it adds so much good flavor if you have it on hand. And of course, we'll be using oil and salt in this recipe. First, to your pan, you're going to add your cabbage. I'm adding about 4 cups of sliced cabbage, and we're adding our 2 grated carrots as well. Next, we're adding 2 tablespoons of soy sauce and about a teaspoon of our sesame oil. I'm taking the cabbage leaves and sticking them on top just so they can steam and soften up, because I've seen a couple of different people do the cabbage leaves as the pot sticker outside for those that are trying to follow a more low carb diet. I'm cutting the heat down to a lower heating setting, and then I'm going to get to work on making the wrappers for our pot stickers. First, you're going to need 1.5 cups of flour and 1/2 cup of boiling hot water. Add your 1.5 cups of flour to your bowl. Then you're going to add 1/2 cup of your boiling hot water to this mixture and stir with a fork until it's somewhat combined. Then you can switch to working with it with your hands once it's cooled down just a bit so that it won't burn your hands. This was pretty amazing to learn because I didn't realize that you could make these wrappers just with water and flour. Now our wrappers that are low carb, which are just these cabbage wraps, are really flexible. The steam has done its work and they are ready to be used as well. I went in and turned off the heat, and we're going to start working with our wrappers. First, you're going to get a small ball about 1/2 inch thick, and you're going to start rolling that out. If you don't have a rolling pin, another option you could use is the end of a wooden spoon. You will run into an issue if you're trying to just roll it straight across the counter, but if you pull your cutting board towards the end of the counter, it actually works fairly well in helping you to roll these out evenly. This is just if you don't have a dumpling roller or you don't have access to a rolling pin. Once one of our wrappers is rolled out, we're going to stick it over the edge of the bowl that has all our dough in it. And we're just going to layer it kind of like this. Now these are about as thin as I could get them, and you want them that way so that you don't have a ton of dough on each of your pot stickers. I'm taking off the softened cabbage and I'm going to set it aside now that it's been steamed and is really flexible. Next, we're going to add in our ½ pound of sausage and stir to combine. We're going to add in our teaspoon of sesame oil, which I mentioned earlier, so you're only going to want 1 teaspoon in this whole thing. Then I'm adding in a dash of garlic powder and a good healthy pinch of salt as well. Mix all these ingredients together. Don't worry that the pork sausage is not cooked. You are going to be steaming and cooking these dumplings, and the steaming process will definitely cook these dumplings thoroughly. You're going to add about a tablespoon of your cabbage pork mixture into each of these wrappers. Err on the side of less rather than more, because if you put too much in, it's really hard to close them and they do split. If they split, it's no big deal. It will all taste the same and it only affects the aesthetic of the dish. Now we've got a bunch of these all rolled out and put together. We still have a lot of filling and a lot of dough left, and of course we still have our low carb wrappers over to the side. We're going to turn our pan onto medium heat and add in just enough oil to coat the bottom. You don't want too much oil because you don't want these to turn out greasy. A trick one of my roommates, who is from China, gave me was to put your chopsticks in, and when you see little bubbles forming around it, that's when you know the dumplings are ready to go in the pan, that the pan is hot enough. After 1 to 2 minutes, they should be ready to flip over to the other side. You're looking for this light brown color on the bottoms. Add in about 1/4 cup of water and put a lid on top. If you don't have a lid for this particular pan, you can use aluminum foil, and the pot stickers will steam for about 5 minutes. Now we're going to work on these low carb options. What you're going to do is just spoon in about 1 tablespoon of the mixture and roll it up like this. I'd love to hear from you all, since the focus of this video has been making meals on a budget but in a way that is fresh. What are some of your favorite fresh veggies to add to your meals? Now we have all of these rolled up, and we're going to be sticking these in the next batch in our pan. Now let's check on our pot stickers, and yeah, they're looking good. Brown on all the sides, the dough is looking cooked through, and we're just going to give them a little flip. If they start getting stuck, it's okay. All of the pans do this, but if you can't move it with your chopsticks, then just put your chopsticks together and use them like a shovel, like this. That should scoop them right off the bottom of the pan, and you won't have a whole lot of holes or anything in your pot stickers. And if you do, they will still taste delicious. Now we're putting our cabbage wrapped low carb options into the pan, and I was interested to see how these would work out because I haven't tried this before, but I've seen this going around. I don't know if it's TikTok or YouTube or where, but I've been meaning to try this. So today was the day to see how these would go. And while the cabbage versions are steaming, we're going to start with our soy sauce dipping sauce. You're going to put about 3 tablespoons of soy sauce into your little cup that I have on the side, and you're going to add a little bit of garlic if you have it, or garlic powder would also work. I'm using chopped garlic that I had on hand. And then I'm going to top everything off with a little bit of the chopped green onion. I really love this green onion. It was very inexpensive. Green onion is definitely one of those things that packs a good flavor punch and also is really cost effective, because if you didn't know, you can plant green onion that you get from the store. It still has its roots on. You can leave it in some water and it will stay green as long as it has a good source of sunlight, and it will last you a long time and keep growing back as you snip off pieces. And this meal was so delicious. The soy sauce and sesame oil really add a lot of flavor to this dish, And the low carb options were also delicious. I would say make them small so that you can eat them all in one bite, because it is harder to chew these in half with the cabbage wrappers. I'd love to hear any ideas you all have for what recipes I should do next, and until then, click on some of these other videos if you need more meal inspiration. I'll see y'all in the next one.